Lord America, Humanity Volume Science. See, the sciences were inherited, abridged, hyper abridged, and that was sustained while they were being engineered, roles with them abridged as hyper abridgments, also tactically through other motivations, natures, needs, interests. Note as identity the ground locations. And this is a method that was uses of how the ground in the suburbs was tactically denatured, and that had been sustained since before our founding parents were born, let alone, and it was specifically for the syntactically manifest conjunctions to that, where conjunctionally and hyperconjunctionally, the value of the hyper simultaneous is was increasingly, has, in other words, has been increasingly, because that's relevant to where and how it's being, having been self-valued by the identities of logic and their defenses of the premises treatments and qualities of fact aspects of facts treatment nature defenses and sequence value defenses offensively relevant to that which was collusion at all locations, again too syntactically. In other words, nature has these letters of our languages individually grouped and together bound as that better than living identity of species body of volume, invisible but still discernibly, to distinct from how we are individuals, how we are grouped, and how we are species body, is simultaneously in demonstration of the way to answer this, of the answer slash as to this, which involves the value of the simultaneous, which involves the value of sequence truth, which involves the hyper invisible but still discernible. All parts of English grammar, for example, all parts of the languages, they have a relationship to themselves, the sounds, where and how our bodies have this natural design tied to what is actually having revealed everything and the value of it simultaneously. See, we are no longer the system that is hyper native. That means, for example, without criminal foreign influences, legalized or not, and that's so differentially increasingly, and that having been used towards it by the engineering at our locations, that involved the complete syntactical possession, therefore the complete syntactical slavery of all locations, is in states everywhere the human volume is. The human volume science has is actually manifest, hyper manifest, slash hyper manifest. I tell it best. The only way to discern the natural system shows us that the extent of its volume that we could discern, that is greater than and more finite than, while being distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously as our own volume. Again, is that is actually what made our system. What really is going to cause positive or negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. For example, there was and is remote uses of the assigned, just like they assign tasks, functions in programming language. They assign identities, value progressions at locations using memory of positive and negative. So all the certain kind of victim predator A through Z that was made by the breaching method, that was sustained against Native Americans, and then sickly distinctly against them as, you know, forced treaties and agreements abridged sciences, you know, and so increasingly syntactically, now they're fighting with each other and about real things, but they're leaving out how, and they're not discerning how all that was being used remotely. Not just everyone was used remotely because they were colonized. Colonization is remote uses. It's a breaching method. Wars are a breaching method, and or they are simultaneously counter-breaching method. See, no one spoke for the semi-ancient shared imposition sickly distinctly, because those were engineered already having been self-valued. Victim reactions as groupthink. No, groupthink was a phrase used by MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News through wars and relative to the World Trade Center attack. So, for example, this is also how they make us use other people's names. How they had, in other words, they have kids involved with, for example, if we tell American history correctly, as our founders left us to teach it, because they was too entrenched in the way it was entrenched, /S. See, no one could afford that, discern properly how our founders didn't have free. Everyone was scared to have free speech, so that they fed everyone, forced counter-extorted, and given means to share narratives that were coordinated with a means to defend each other. And they were all forced, tricked, or persuaded, you know, to blame what the breaching method was caused. Other things, others, ourselves. And people are still doing that and pretending motivations for doing it other than, but that were actually in possession of that, even when it's good or bad, even when it's delusions. When people, there are, like, when people use the words like politics, they have simultaneously unliber, you know, how the each camp is sickly distinctly at each age and nature of fact-keeping nature through other motivations, nature's needs, interests. They are used remotely through our own too, but shown needs to hurt individuals, grouped, and everyone with time treatments, etc., relevant to where and how people that make positive and negative treatments are simultaneously making identity treatment, and where and how computers work. Actually, anything that can work is further positive or negative. Criminal insidiousness, nature, use lies, use truths for lies, including criminally foreign influence branches. Now, so the differential criminal foreign influences were involved with that which was simultaneously responsible for the motivations actually real or made up regarding where and how it was acted and presented as real. Witch trials. Also at the ground locations where George Washington and our founders had to leave slavery entrenched sickly distinctly in the North and sickly distinctly in the South. And again, where they had to hide their real roles with the counters to that. You know, so we're supposed to have the Constitution on a bridge to Marbury versus Madison, meaning, quote, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice, quote. And sequence, the value of sequence true. And we're supposed to be able to use as evidences where and how legal natures would use the right to the quote right to lie, unquote, as one of the men and women recorded too, involved with where, in other words, it, not only were the three branches of government used remotely with colonization, and not only was the colonization itself used remotely, and all that was to hide what all identity ground locations were used for, and that simultaneously there was means to maintenance of those hyper predicate acts, roles with a hyper predicate act, singular. The plot to have and build effectively as they built the phenomenon of modern all locations, areas, and states where humanity is now identities that are individually grouped and together, self-valued, tactical ulterior from that hypernative system that is really what is that shows us really what's going to cause positive or negative value nature progressions action nature. Just like one calculator is one function slash s that will give us exact answers, where physics, metaphysics, and identity are bound. This is to there is an extent too that we can discern greater than and more finite than, no, even before the value of the smallest detail, the smallest finite detail, the value of sequence truth is relevant again to where the identity that each verb has to itself. So we can discern the main verb. And so the subject and the sentence. So we're doing all this simultaneously. There's complete possession of each of the identities of the sciences in parallel to this manifest, where how that certain type of victim predator would be and could be motivated originally and still with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and that insidiousness A through Z that is simultaneously the subject slash S, where and how slavery using black physics, and white, black people's whites of eyes, how that was never simultaneously addressed, how the species volume science has other means and needs for our syntax nature tied to uses of these colors. Not just about the compare, it is functional how there is an identity that binds all the languages distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously the same exact way, slash S. And it shows, in other words, to manifest are not just the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall. One of the things they are commonly, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously the same way. I mean, not non-distinctly the same way, while they are further distinctly. There are three identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature. Relative to scientific observation with Nas honesty, not denying the slightest finite detail, like the value of sequence truth before the order of the finite, now before the smallest detail. No, finite in the word the definite article. There is only one definite article. No, a and an, the indefinite articles. Words that start with vowels, you put and before it. But definite, finite, no finite as the root of the word for both definite and the indefinite. Finite, small detail. Because honest science, not denying slightest detail and or nor exception, for example, which is relevant because one of the things this is about discerning the identity of the cell. It is the identity of the body of the cell, except for how it is the identity of the wall distinctly. And it is the identity of the wall, except for how it is the identity of the body distinctly. And of the value of the discernment of the identity of sequence / simultaneous nature. That is the extent of the value of the nucleus that we can begin. We start with discerning simultaneously, because just like physics, metaphysics, and identity are not just bound, but they are bound by that one identity of hypersimultaneous. The simultaneous is a forever nature. Only the extent of it is debatable. And so American history and other histories, we have to deal with how they get away with pretending things are debatable that aren't debatable. And by attaching ourselves as citizens to fake words. And how they've been getting away with uses of the right to lie with all kinds of countless identities of police forms, courts, and public mayors and their family members and neighbors and friends and like that. Everyone got lost, sucked into a breaching method that's complete remote possession of all victim reactions, specifically for where and how the breaching method knew it would have to hide its motivations. And effectively it did it and does it. For example, uses of black were assigned a value. They were assigned of /S as all identity ground locations for all identity ground memories, identities, titles, locations, uses, details, uses. Know how little kids are closer to the small finite. Know how elderly are taller, or more right to left, or more top down. Little kids are more bottom up. Well, why don't you write a book about it? I've been asking to have mandated law followed off campuses, off interbranch locations, and on interbranch locations since I was a kid. There are connections to people with with their kids. They use their kids when they were kids. Now this is also the breaching method wants and needs everyone to perceive when people use other people's names that things are personal like that, and to keep everyone roles preventing mandated law because there are other motivations. In other words, there are people. All these people were abused when they were kids by people they didn't even know the names of, and through their own parents too, but differentially too. It's where and how the interbranch and everyone was differentially criminally foreign influence, but increasingly, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a police force, I'm not a criminal. The lawyers are recorded originally and still also roles with preventing proper syntax and proper revelations and uses of short words. And as the roles with uses of witch trials and assignments of uses of black, that again had nothing to do with the motivations written on paper and directed by those slavery laws to be spoke of. In other words, to tell people that what the motivations were. Because that breaching method already knew that when we put the value of what is simultaneous, where and how witch trials are actually manifest with the reception of American history at each age in nature, where and how the locations next to and as where George Washington had to come counter-extort, only could counter-extort that which is entrenched with slavery north and south. Not just with slavery, though, not just with uses of the black and white. In other words, with that breaching method that was sustained against everyone sickly distinctly, not just Native Americans, but that's it's against every single person. No matter how powerful a leader could get now, they have to entertain locations, areas, and states, criminally foreign influenced, sequence value treatments, self-value, finite, active, progressive, and hyper-value treatments, which the ground has a conjunction to. So we could discern this, where and how the hyper invisible, as the question is, the hyper invisible but still discernible. And so these answers require understanding the identity of volume that is invisible but discernible only through its conjunction / hyperconjunction to all other identities of volume. So all the identities of our body distinct, species, all the identities of your body individual, the cells of your body, the organs they make up distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, the cell walls they share, no. And two identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. Discernible with the reception of the water and of the gases and of its identity of volume. For example, the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall. And that discernible just through the plants. Chloroplast. I don't know if living animal material is chloroplast, but plants are made up of chloroplast. I tell fast because it is faster than fast, more finite, while slow. See, one identity alone could be the value. In other words, we're hot or cold, our value. It is not just to discern the value of the warmth. It is to discern the value of the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. This is, in other words, thank God, any system that would entertain where and how uses of black / white / colors, therefore, in other words, in clear treatments. Where we are syntax. Now everyone's manifest, incapable, stuck on punk, no matter who you are. No matter who's hurt worse by it, everyone's also stuck on compare. And this is the system that would measure and maintain the hurt and or help specifically to keep everyone hurting others if they try to use correlation rather than comparison. So no one has been able to speak for American history because no one had taught properly how there was the complete possession over each individual, group, and together. Because how everyone's syntax nature, their identities, their titles, their voices, uses of what actually is being demonstrated by the nature of the actually hyper simultaneous. And this is not theory. This is discerning. This is a definition of the hyper simultaneous to show where we have to show what is and being an individual is being a sequence / simultaneous nature. It is a sequence nature relationship to the species body. therefore grouped bodies. It's volume science. It's this a breaching method, the proverbial devil. I don't have time to put this in art and make it fun. Like only the people who don't really care, which is everyone, are allowed to use locations with media. And this is one of the things that hurts everyone sickly, non-distinctly. It is as the method, how it is discernible, invisible but still discernible. It is manifest as a method, a singular method of identity theft, fraud, slanders. And it uses corners of streets and corners of buildings and neighbors, everyone's. It uses the quote, sense and sensibilities, unquote, Jane Austen's phrase. But also sense. This is also the dictionaries. These are the identity of volume as the identity of value/value progression. Humanity science. So they have humanities, plural, for motivations, influences, means, needs, interests, tactically ulterior from the breaching methods, but as the breaching methods regarding conception of humanities, regarding conception of linguistics, of people trained to be experts on top of things, people employed to incomes, justifications that are still in collusion with where and how they can't defend their logic with that, and afford discern that which is really having been demonstrated to us, not just by our founding parents, but by nature itself, which the messengers of modern religions and our founding parents in America and in other countries, they were forced to make counter governments to where and how already every country in every location of the human volume across the globe of Earth were already being and having been used remotely, individually grouped and together. Again, tactical ulterior from the sciences unabridged, without criminal foreign influences, quote, not criminally foreign, quote, criminal foreign influences, unquote, or criminally foreign influenced. Those are phrases that we need to use relative to the breaching method. Now, that breaching method knew that nature was going to demonstrate to every individual of the species body at all locations, areas, and states before anyone was sophistication to know it now, while as sense and sensibilities of nervous systems, as interests, as ground locations, voices. Not alone, and even when alone, sickly distinctly, every weakness, every strength is being and having been employed to needed time, illusions associated with sequence shifts at all locations, sickly distinctly. And again, there are means that we could see to discern together how sickly non-distinctly. But the way to seize it is by following mandated law for individuals outside of interbranch locations, because they are already being and having been used differentially, but differentially increasingly, criminally foreign influenced. And all that was in conjunction with the worst patients and criminals and killers and their worst victim predator, conjunctions with other branches of government, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and that insidiousness to the positive and negative treatments, like, oh, it's politics. That's a positive or negative treatment. That's an identity treatment. It comes with all kinds of convictions and opinions, offensively affront, as people are pertaining passions and emotions against strangers after the media attaches me and others to fake locations, for example, for where and how it is relevant, for where and how there are linguistics experts have been in collusion with people stacking fake things into databases and uses of their own kids and other people's kids, where and how identity the ground locations, including and especially regarding how hospital locations have psychology involved with ones with badges, and various natures of courts also on off the state judicial branch offices, the state prison offices being and having been used remotely, involved with child abuses, people involved intercities, those people involved all along that route that goes by, and the road there, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, being and having been involved with the intelligence community, military, foreign, and domestic, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. Also with Weathersfield's police chief through time, and 1 year ago before he came in, 1 or more years ago before he came in, and uses of that transitions. And they have one now. I don't know if that was the one who hung up on me. They've been pretending passions and emotions since I was a kid. That's one of the reasons. See, but this is not, they also get away with this because they separate exceptions and exception nature's actual course. So a cell is one identity. That is true. But there are exceptions. It is the cell body. It is the cell wall. And it is the cell nucleus. It is exception nature in addition to itself, while simultaneously absent of ourselves because of where and how we are being coupled with the value of the hyper simultaneous science on with no criminal foreign influences, especially differentially if legalized, as they were left incapable of defending any identity grounds takes on themselves and what they can perceive as normally everyone's making defending their time achievements and their defenses of it. They were handed means to get away with it by roles with the identity theft fraud method using the corners of streets and buildings. Well, you have to allow mandated law because these are, although we have overt criminal enterprises, killers, and people associated with the body dumping spots, the same people are involved with forensics locations through time. Those forensic locations and the schools that train these people and the police forms, they are being and having been involved with an already having been perfected a breaching method that is vertically and horizontally, preemptively while simultaneously it already has been, and there are others needing and the same people needing preemptively and after the fact to hide lipoaggressions. And one of the ways the one way /S that they're getting away with it is provided to them as a method that is completely fact human nature oriented, but it is in conjunction with other natures of good and bad things, in the sense that where and how criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments and of identity treatments were simultaneously multi-front by nature, being demonstrated. The hyper enslaved, syntactically, therefore functionally. And in addition to this, and then with all exceptions, in exception nature and demonstration of the same thing, such as overt criminal enterprises, plural, also involved with where and how this breaching method had complete and has complete remote possession of counters to the real causes of predicate acts, like fact-cheating nature-oriented ones, like physical ones. So there's a Karen Violet, and there's a Mark Violet, and a Mike Violet, and Andrea Violet. I never had a conversation with Andrea Violet. They tried to make an appearance of exception at a corner of Elm Street and Route 3 when I was a kid. I never had a class with Mark Violet. I never saw him around on my campuses. In other words, I'm sorry, Violets. In other words, this is just about there's an O'Brien family, and your friend with the military police and the black-white pretending passions and emotions. I thank that fraud slanders. No, a kid who's shorter than most of the kids in our grade. About pretending to know me behind my back with people from my grammar school. So one of them was apparently married to him. I only saw him one time on campus. It was a real quick, for instance. It was a nonverbal confirmation of his roles with Lucinda, who was one of the ones that I didn't have a class, so I didn't have anything to do with her. I never saw her around. But she was involved with Tim O'Brien, Andrew O'Brien, and their parents and other extended family members, and they involved their neighbors and how they became people involved with the FBI and Hartford Police and Wethersfield Police and Rocky Hill Police, and uses of those locations like the corners of streets, but that one at the corner of Elm Street and Rocky Hill and Route 3 has people with Yukon involved with people from a whole bunch of different countries that have been in the news, where they have to say good things and bad things about each other. See, this is where they self-value, where countries won't talk to each other, individually grouped together. So they have to hold, and then things are too dangerous. So we have to watch. We have to understand that we're not just using as proofs what they say. Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. Their sources are also involved with that corner. There's a Mazzucato bakery. I barely know them. They made an exception with a Marino Mazzucato at a really fast. And then we had a coffee at his bakery in Hartford when I was a kid. There was like two other exceptions they tried to make. In other words, that's one of the people reportedly married to the police chief's daughter, who John Mayano recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, has involved with sequence shifts. I never met her, never saw her around in my life. John involved with other natures of federal rules of evidences, crimes. Evidence is racketeering with judges and prosecutors and other countries and military. And as people involved with the uses of corners and of the shopping centers, like on Town Line Drive, people also involved with with exploitation syntactically, where there are town lines used and involved. Again, where it is valuable. In other words, thank God, nature itself will demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures to people, individuals, groups, into the species volume, having entertained, or self-valuing, having been entertained, with their logic, systems that would use slavery, which being the victim of a witch trial is a form of slavery. That was simultaneous with that method that assigned Black as roles with other natures of predicate acts. No. Child abuses and elderly abuses were simultaneously confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, self-valued by the three branches of government, by the breaching method that is communicating to us too. Not it. No, it, because nature is demonstrating this to us. That's what the value of the simultaneous. Not only is it valuable that nature will demonstrate that wrong, nature itself, just like the calculator, nature has the ancient gaming system, because evolution should only feel like games. Or we should be able to sense, whoa, integrity of science says, whoa, nuclear weapons, atomic bombs. Oh my God, the delivery systems of, all these crazy things they're doing together and having been done together. That's a certain type of victim. Just like the overt criminal enterprises, and in fact, in collusion with them, and the private ones originally and still. But we have to also simultaneously discern that insidiousness to people A through Z. So this method knew that it would make identities the law as the phenomenon of the identities, therefore manifest trinities of government and exceptions in exception nature, but in demonstration of the same thing. But now see those natural courses. In other words, they're painting fake exceptions preemptively. In other words, they're making people bring up things, and then they're locking boys and girls sickly distinctly into needing to not be able to talk about how they know other people's names, because there are criminally foreign influenced narratives. They already were. This have made a certain kind of victim. All the programs with the kids are being and elderly simultaneously. Those are identity ground locations uses. People are getting paychecks. They want to speak as experts, but they want to use those narratives in the background, prevent people proper, what is discernible. We don't even have to be in those locations to know it. So in other words, they have time treatments where they use time simultaneously too fast, too slow, while they are simultaneously fabricating things into records and pretending other people are liars. And they are keeping that other people liars only manifest going into courts because of those courts' locations roles, every individual grouped in together with that narrative leveraged, with those narratives bound, leveraged against the short words and revelations actually capable of being at each age of fact nature regarding questions that are only increasingly valuable and demonstration of the only increasing value progression system perfect only. That's part of the ways. The hyper invisible, but still discernible, stays functional. And then how calculators work, how they work. It is simultaneously, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously further its identity of sequence / simultaneous nature system works. Jerks. Calculators go with physics. And here, physics, metaphysics, and identity are bound. So Black was assigned functions as roles, as employments, with a method, a singular breaching method that regardless of anyone's motivations, in other words, everyone's victims, you guys had replaced, just like the Native Americans, same exact, sickly distinctly. Specifically, you have how you everyone sickly distinctly is how their education is offensively prevented by those pretending and having pretended passions and emotions regarding the reception of education, which simultaneously is the reception of positive and negative, which simultaneously is the reception of identity, which simultaneously is reception of the identity that is a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, the hyper simultaneous, from where and how we are distinct identities of sequence as simultaneous nature as individuals, as grouped, and as species body of volume /S, self-generating, being self-generated, self-generating / being self-generated. By that system, again, these are all apart from its. So it's demonstrating and having demonstrated the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, acts, natures, blamed on things others ourselves. So there are people from Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. And there are men and women who used little kids with the name Bobby as a little girl and as little boys, or at least one boy named Bobby and one girl named Bobby, who is involved on off Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, with a path of people that go through time, intercities. They've been stacking rolls with falsified police reports from backgrounds, spreading simultaneously orchestrated natures of identity theft, frauds, instances, narratives, including with their uses of Facebook. The stewards of the New Britain Superior Court have roles with the FBI and other agencies, and with doctors, foreign and domestic, of mental health, and with little kids, and their uses of their own and the foreign and domestic little kids, planting evidences, and including how that is fact-cheating nature-oriented ones, uses of people's names, criminal. I don't know Chris Delafera. He pretended to know me at a corner of a street I was there for 2 seconds. In other words, and then his father tried to pretend, in other words, and there's a Mike Delafera. They were pretending other behind my back because they have a whole bunch of ways with courts, political figures of all levels, and police forms, as the people themselves with their family members as actually recorded, criminally foreign influenced, even if they are undercover with pertaining to be gangs and associated with it and stuff like that. They're actually involved with predicate acts, with interbranch switches names and forges names, where and how originally and still they were preventing the wrong outcomes in cases, sickly distinctly from the breaching method, and where and how that is in the way of that which is invisible but discernible. The phrase wise guy is recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, where they have complete remote possession over narratives, over the sense and sensibilities of people, where they have defenses of their own, where they don't know how to speak or act. Oh, that's just this guy, that guy. In other words, people will make opinions about the behavior of others, but they won't prevent anyone from demonstrating how the behavior of others is being and having been used remotely by a breaching method that is discernible now as just as it was discernible then. The second anyone honest is being, so this was just when you're young, a breaching method caused and exploited where and how. No, that you didn't want, you're glad that slavery was beaten. Now, there are people that make counters to that as roles in the furtherance of it. as a certain type of victim predator, which, thank God, people A through Z have been blaming other things, others, ourselves. They invested themselves. Defensive of that, what is it? What was caused by what was actually recorded. So people are increasingly self-valuing, quote, fake news, unquote, to quote President Trump. And they would say that the presidents, not just President Trump, that both parties are being and have been used remotely. Where and how the parties fight with each other, and people are being and having been using words like politics. It is where and how they were backed into using pens and time and identities as weapons, titles as weapons, locations as weapons, fact, human nature, quality / IES, and aspects as weapons, times since founding. So a whole bunch of other countries in our own have shared policing, and they have theories that are delusions wrought and criminally foreign influence uses of fact, human nature simultaneously. And how they got and get away with this is because a breaching method knew to all locations this would be a cause of problems that would be manifest with human behavior and with between everybody, A through Z. And it knew that they would abridge science's roles as victims, just like the overt criminal enterprises know, who came through the same campuses, dealt with family members and people associated with those same campuses. And there are uses of that manifest. And there is one use of that manifest simultaneous. But to discern it, we have to use as value. The same system, thank God, that causes negative value, nature, progression, X natures, and demonstration. Okay, you guys are a system other. You guys have, someone has slavery entertained. We're supposed to sense that. See, this preaching method made sense and sensibilities. Sense through fear, and pretend to be against fear, because rightfully that fear was unnatural. It was engineered, but it was correct. It was also logic. It was complete possession over the syntax nature, therefore the function, over every identity, at every location, area, and state, everywhere the species body of volume is. And it knew that that would increasingly be demonstrated by nature. And it knew that increasingly, simultaneously, would be manifest. Identities of titles, names, locations, voicings, sequence, treatments, values, that would increasingly have to value and or have to act other individuals grouped in together, people they don't even know, timed, the illusions of sequence shifts and other things against them, and everyone around everyone. They attach everyone to fake words too. This attaches little kids and their family members to fake words, and they got away with it and get away with it at locations like campuses, because the locations like the various natures of courts and the police forms that bring people before themselves and that bring things into their databases that everyone missed. Those are criminally foreign influenced employments, the information they're putting in the databases, their self-value uses of them rolls with that. So mandated laws, the WFSB is associated also with the businesses in housing locations, also with foreign and domestic military at that corner. And they have roles with people with Connecticut forensics locations involved with wire crimes, identity thefts, and frauds with a woman named O'Neill, who's a teacher with West Hartford, reportedly by the news, and with Wethersfield Police. There's a police officer named O'Neill. This is a Wethersfield Police Department that has been involved with predicate acts with the FBI through time, recorded. Predicate act methods recorded roles too. So they tried to pretend, they tried to make fake exceptions with a Mark Violet, who I do know. And there are men and women that pretended they had conversations with me verbally, who never had a conversation with me verbally in my life. When I was a kid, that had rolled with falsified police reports as people that were using their roles with drug dealing for identity theft frauds. Then they call people rats when those are the people ratting on others. It's relevant to where and how there's an Eric Oliveri and there's a Mark Violet who made confessions, demonstrated, recorded with other people involved at Trinity College in Hartford and Zion Street, uses of locations next to it. These are all people involved with fire departments and with this O'Brien family, with a whole bunch of people at Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College and other campuses, colleges and universities I didn't even go to, and child campuses, private and public, I didn't go to, involved with identity theft, frauds, slanders against me, and the methods involved, which are real quick instances, and there are exceptions they already pretended to perceive as other in cases. The forgiveness for them is to show, we have to show what is actually recorded anyway, where people A through Z, the branches of government, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, everyone was lying together and defending that. And there are uses of the illusions that everyone's furthering together with that and having furthered together with that. It sounds complicated, but it's not. So they pretend they don't understand people by preventing people from using short words, where and how also relevant manifest as that which is hyper evidential is where and how the branches of government of Connecticut switch and forge names individually grouped and together. They self-value roles with that, and that is being and having been used remotely. And so such is relevant where and how each individual of New York City is prevented, sickly distinctly, means to connect how actually naturally connected there are finite, grouped, and altogether simultaneous demonstrations, both of how actually to cause positive value, how actually only positive value nature progressions, acts and natures can be caused naturally. But those voicings are prevented by people simultaneously manifest needing to pretend others simultaneously. So it is increasingly hyper significant where and how people pretend, the theater associated with the news. Predicate act. One of the ways they got away with it is by pretending we're saying things personal about them. They're pretending passions and emotions, no. As rules in collusion against strangers at locations. And also, they're getting away with this because they have faith, but also dishonest faith in their roles with FBI and CIA at locations, areas, and states, and uses of the locations next to WFSB, next to Fox Connecticut News, and uses of their narratives regarding how they feel about themselves and others, and or me, regarding their uses of locations actually recorded. So they have to pretend lies. They have to pretend not to like me. They have to find any excuse to, and other people. And they can't voice it though. So they have to value provided for them or have to make for themselves fake exceptions to get value that being made by others. Like when you're acting, if you walk by someone when you're a kid and the person had no conversation, you don't even know who you are, and they take a picture like that, trying to make an exception to pretend that person knows you. They ask you if you know them. I don't know Joshua Julian, for example. He's one of them person who confessed too, with differentiating, saying totally different things, and then admitted to pretending other with people on my street who also confessed, recorded, demonstrated him. I never saw him on my street in my life. He confirmed he rolls on my street and on and off a principal child abuser's campus when it was still being forced with others involved, including doctors and their kids, and ones with the same location who live next to the schools and involved with drugs and medicines crimes, because their evidence is planted. It's one of the various natures. They have elderly homes, but they have the distinctly superior courts, probate courts, district courts, Ninth Circuit courts, which are appeals courts, I presume. Fake branches break to make real broom and drum. Real science should only feel like game /S. Real science is offensively prevented by that which is being pretended as real science. For example, using definitions of real, self-valuing definitions of real that were themselves enslaved at the end of controlling the whip of that breaching method that needed everyone, including the victims of it, to blame other things, others, ourselves for the real causes of the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. Like the predicate act of whipping someone with a whip, which is simultaneously a predicate act delivery system method. Roles. It's worse than just, but while being extortion. Now, so we have narratives that, let's make a reading of the law to figure out. They haven't even done that legitimately here or there, because we have these fake groupings. They have needs to use the name of Hitler, for example, with passions and emotions, only to stay in collusion at all locations, areas, and states. Needed to hide from and hurt and value being and having been hurt. Uses of how those how actually manifest the locations, areas, and states, and leaders' voices are. The same thing with uses of Joseph Mengele. And then I saw on Twitter, YouTube somewhere, he has relatives that look disturbed about it. In a way where it's what's actually recorded, those narratives are being, having been employed, individually grouped and together, our countries, in defenses of themselves, which are simultaneous. In other words, implied, relevant to where all locations, areas, and states. They have psychology, psychiatry involved with their databases and involved with physical, actual healthcare, where originally and still predatory healthcare that has nothing to do with healthcare. In fact, it's hurting people. Has roles with the Institute of Living in Hartford, Connecticut, on the campus of Hartford Hospital, was founded in 1822. With slavery still in the North and South, even though we're a country and the Constitution says we're supposed to get it unabridged, regardless of what it says. In other words, that's what our founders wanted. They could tell no lies, but they were being forced to tell lies because they were in complete possession of a breaching method that had them locked down into the whip syntactically. So they had treatments of reality that left out and leave out reality's full volume. So nature's nature is bigger than that. the nature of reality was bigger than and more finite than the nature of the reality. They're saying, look, this is real. This is your identity science. No! See, black pupils, whites of eye, each species body. It's not about, words. It's about blaming. We're the metaphysical mistreatments instead of the names. See how manifest the rap songs? People A through Z. Everyone's going to do like they're not using people. So once in a while, there's exceptions. They'll use someone's name. A lot of lyrics still on. They're doing aggression. Aggression is not positive or negative. It's where it is invisible but discernibly valued. In other words, someone brought up on which trial charges is going to be presented means and there is going to be presented means and needs to speak calmly that would be prevented, and to yell that would be prevented. So sense and sensibilities of the overt criminal enterprises. See, we have people that have, there's a guy who runs the computers for a long time with Wethersfield campuses. Reportedly, I never had a conversation with him in my life, verbally. There's one, I don't know if he's the same guy, grabbed my wrist years ago. He's one of the ones involved with an Oliveri family who had been planting evidences, locking girls at Trinity College into roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders with him and his brother and other people from Wethersfield involved at Trinity College and at Central Connecticut State University with federal crimes with former director of the FBI, Robert Lusk, in his defendant capacities, leading up to that and since, as were their roles also leading up to the Ninth Circuit and leading up to the attack on the 9/11 on the World Trade Center. Leading up to it, and in that context, they were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed collusion with sequence shifts and with other natures of predicate acts and natures of identity theft, frauds, instances, timed with strangers in all exception nature and demonstration of the same thing, as people who also colluded with intercities, Connecticut locations and uses of corners and of exceptions where they pretend they, in other words, has something to do also with their houses on Church Street, also involved with ones at the end of Church Street, and involved with where there's now I'm not saying this just manifests this way, so it's interesting. There's a witch trials place. There was witch trials in the north here in Connecticut, in Wethersfield, Connecticut. And it's like right near the corner of it's right near the corner of Church Street and Main Street in Old Wethersfield. And there's like a little attachment where it's coming in. So there's it's on like a street and touching it, like at a cross section. But then right around the corner there on the Main Street is the house, the Webb House, where George Washington had to come and leave slavery entrenched. No. So everyone's fact-keeping nature, we know simultaneously things there are all kinds of simultaneous revelations tied to that. People were fear. That was simultaneously righteous. It was correct. In other words, if they spoke up against things, they were going to be hurt. They were slaves. Everyone, A through Z, sickly distinctly too, because they were keeping how uses of black or white or any exception nature were being and having been measured and maintained by the breaching method where no one discerned this, even the Native Americans. Everyone sickly distinctly has an advantage to discern this. Those advantages are being and having been employed by the breaching method self-value used to obfuscate this instead. The sense, the nervous system of the humanity, the sense and sensibilities and defenses of them are being and having been reliant upon. Methods that are about methods like pretending people use others' names. Oh, this is just under pretending their motivations were only that and are only that. So they have complete possession over the sense and sensibilities of each of the identities of industries, voices, individually grouped together. Still. So they have means to understand this, but only to an extent. So they pretend that, it's not their fault. They speak to themselves, or when they're speaking to others about what causing the negative value nature, progressions, acts, natures in New York City, for example, where it is each country has spots where it is more overtly / insidiously manifest that which is actually manifest all over and states, the breaching method. Again, tactical ulterior from humanity's actually manifest value science, volume science, as it is actually manifest. It is who, what, where, and how. Who, what, where, when, and how. Differentially increasingly valuable. And is always why. Additionally to this, relevant to where and how. 1/5 / 1/3/5 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature are invisible but still discernibly bound, and as a hyperconjunction to all parts of languages, not just of English language. The sounds of humanity have a better than living identity of relationship to itself, to their self / s. Where and how, more and more. See, one of the things that the hyper simultaneous is constantly as its identity of relationship to itself. It is simultaneously a forever nature. Only the extent of it is debatable. And where and how people debate that or would or could debate that manifest with their quality of fact treatment nature, manifest with their premises treatments, qualities of fact treatment nature, aspects of fact treatment nature, identity treatments, positive and negative treatments are simultaneous identity treatments. See, the hyper simultaneous is that which really is going to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and means out of nowhere as evolution's fruits and gifts. It means out of nowhere, especially where and how we are fact treatment nature manifest. I tell it best again. We're all tactically systems of logic, tactically ulterior from that which is actually manifest and capable of being voiced. Short words proper are revelations. The simultaneous value of witch trials, sickly distinctly in parts of the North, and of slavery uses of color. Simultaneously, the uses of color / s. They had employments. They had assignments that had nothing to do with that. Specifically, so the roles with that, no matter who forced it, while we are a value / value progression, again, as fact treatment nature, syntax nature. Now, again, too, simultaneously, ulterior from its systems, why and how we're actually, we are supposed to appreciate this value that it's only increasing value. The identity of the hypersimultaneous, the extent of the identity of the Hyper-simultaneous we could discern, which simultaneously is the discernment of that increasing in parallel with the increasing value of its identity of relationship to itself, which are two ways it is invisible but discernible, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously. And the ground goes with the third way. The value of it is also increasingly in parallel bound with those three ways. The hyper invisible but still discernible is functional and capable of being used to make answers to our questions and to our problems and to reveal solutions. Not just better than original solutions while being original solutions, while being use of the order of the order of the finite and the value of the order of sequence truth before the value of the order of the finite, now the smallest detail. Nature's nature and the value of that, its complete identity, its system shows us. The finite is one way, always going to be beyond our control or in it. It's going to be increasingly in our control one way, or we're going to lose it. As exception nature can be made, they can be valued. In other words, the systems are going to make positive or negative value nature progression. It's going to make negative value nature progression as the breaching method. No, its system rolls with it. But they made fake exceptions. They made how people can make money now. They made how people can make positive value nature progressions action nature as exceptions to its breaching method, which it knew someone who's going to use wisdom honestly, someone who's going to use truth honestly, someone who's going to use the voice / voicings of any individually grouped or together, modern religions, even halfway sane and halfway honestly, it would bring the answers, which is actually recorded. There are more probable and practical regarding what to do, regarding where and how this teaching method effectively made the only identities sophistication allowed to deal with or become manifest, and how people have to deal with countering the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidiousness, natures wrongdoers, like criminal enterprises themselves. The breaching method knew they would blame other things, others themselves, wrongly, and then defend that. Where and how we are now systems tactical ulterior from the one that has us actually why and how we are each an individual body of the species individual body. So we could discern the system that's going to cause positive or negative value nature progression. So we could discern how it makes, it has part of the way it is functional by being invisible but still discernible is by being exception nature and demonstration of the same thing. So we could be exceptions to its system. We could be other systems that ignoring its method and system of causing positive and negative value nature progression. It's going to keep demonstrating negative value nature progressions, acts, natures. Even if we have that coupled, other ways to make, narratives, other natures of positive and negative treatments. Increasingly, the syntax nature that uses the one. So in other words, we have to understand the same system that causes negative value nature progressions, acts, nature can be seized to cause evolutions, fruits, and gifts. It means from nowhere. It's everywhere at once. It only feels like games. The campus Marsyas with no criminal foreign influences. Every campus, everywhere you went. Its voice was told through others. Voice was slandered long and tall, short, and active still. So this has to do with the remote uses of identity ground locations. How they have the interests of men and of women in collusion with the abuses of little boys and girls, self-valued. Because and how they have self-valued maskings, screenings of the breaching methods, motivations, roles with the motivations of others regarding their uses of our names, how they have people that with religious involved with identity thefts and frauds, with the interbranch, sickly, just differentially too. And then there's the remote uses of that. Criminal enterprises are being and haven't been involved. And what are they going to say? People that are trained to be involved undercover or whatever, and therefore with criminal enterprises, et cetera, you know what I mean? What are they going to say? If someone says this when they're correct, when they were caught criminally foreign influence towards an actually recorded act in method, indoor method, they're going to say, oh, we have the right to lie. They're going to value the other branches grouped and together, having been already used as natures of logic that know they were already used criminally foreign influence relative to their roles with even investigators and their campuses. They are recorded how kept needing to hide the same sequence shifts, finite active progressive lies together, and criminally foreign influenced identity of ground uses of crime scenes of all natures. So since semi-ancient times, all locations of the human volume have been a hyper crime scene that knew that nature was going to keep demonstrating its method. So it knew it inherited people from semi-ancient times set up by the start of the breaching method. People only capable of defending themselves from the real cause of negative value nature progressions acts in nature's at locations, areas, and states. And sequence value treatments and simultaneous value treatments. The value of what is actually recorded simultaneous in your head is the value of a breaching method. One of the ways they got away with this, get away with it, is because of how they've been pretending to be legitimately observing their own kids and the others' kids. And the people that, and the narratives, when people come for positive or negative interactions with other people, both the positives and the negatives have been employed by people off the locations. And or as those people differentially too. And where how the differentiality is actually manifest. Is evidence. Pretending passions and emotions are the companies with the computers. They are pretending not to realize what that databases, that the breaching method was to all locations, then further into sciences and databases, relationships that have nothing, that are private and stuff, those locations, every individual grouped together of it, as the body works. You jerks, they were being used remotely to all locate, kept needing high hypoglycemia, but speaking anyway. So the courts have wire crime acts and methods and mail crime acts and methods and roles with it, where and how they differentially criminally foreign influence. So they have these time treatments, stacking roles with other natures of crimes, separating subjects, because they have commonly shared criminally foreign influence uses of the locations individually grouped and together, as it is actually manifest. So the Native Americans, the hyper Native American tribe, we have to make and give to Native Americans an extra one. And we have to try to keep up with it. We have to make it and pursue only of that which is only in a positive, increasing as value, as that which is nature's nature. How it is nature further than reality as forced, ulterior from the by what is ulterior. Also, the value of seek whence true is relative to where and how the employments of the public schools and private schools in each age of nature of it, and the colleges and universities, how, where, and how at the same time, vertically and horizontally. From the past, they are keeping the same. They're simultaneously needing to highlight progressions from the past and preemptively, and they have methods of doing this that are being haven't been manifest as actually hyper evidentially recorded. They have styles recorded pretending not to understand this. For example, we could demonstrate if we use the word hyper simultaneous. After we ask them to fix the fake words they attach me and others to. Individually grouped and together, they attach me and others to fake communications. Me, I had no communications with them at all. And they pretended other. So there are people with the name Dylan. There's a Kevin Dylan, and there's an Anna Dylan, and an Annie Dylan. There are uses of that name. As one of the women involved also with black and white female judges, and per formal uses of words black, of words like female, male, boys, girls, and of the significance of it as actually recorded. So WFSB and WTNH and Fox Connecticut News have roles with the extortion and slavery, and with natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders instances, and with this method of attaching people to fake words and fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to other people, and with a principal child abuser. I call also involved with elderly abusers simultaneously. It has something to do with the people on my street and untimely deaths rolls, with the same ones who time that as roles with predicate acts roles, illusions roles, with the databases and narratives on Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College. Forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to speak other than what campus is. Their souls as natures really want and need to speak, they're speaking other. And then they're using that, the sense of disabilities, because people have to use the name of campus. When did one identity of the ground sciences have a voice that was unabridged? What really were the motivations for it? Because don't forget, those motivations were increasingly needed to keep the breaching method from being the answer /S, where other formally is having been taught to kids, while simultaneously other is needed to be pretended value by others from other motivations, natures, needs, interests. They never had an identity that was not criminally foreign influenced and used remotely at each of the branches of government. And used remotely is where all exceptions and exception nature were in demonstration of the same thing. Instead, they survived those theater narratives. Certain kind of victim predator, people taught to use positive and negative treatments like politics, which are simultaneous identity treatments where and how that is syntactically functional. So black was assigned and white was assigned simultaneously, therefore, meanings had nothing to do with that. Just like they assign positive or negative. If I press a key on the keyboard, it is assigned a timing in relationship to where there is a perfect value progression. And so apparently they either call it milliseconds because they chop up seconds into million parts. Control your heart. So if you chop in other words, the clock and time is relevant to the computer because it is relevant to nature's nature and to the value of that, where nature is value / value as nature, where they are simultaneously, distinctly and non-distinctly, and simultaneously / hyper simultaneously how I actually manifest. One identity of complete possession over one extent of complete possession over all parts of space / existence is increasing that identity of extent over itself as the hyper simultaneously as a forever nature. It is some things variably, and it is some things constantly. So where and how variables are manifest, and where and how what is actually constant is manifest, where and how we are syntax nature. Again, further simultaneously, not in other words. Where and how we have this identity of value / value progression system. That is to all locations used remotely. A theater was imposed as the theaters by the programmers of physical computers, of their software, of their hyper the World Wide Web conjunctions. Everything is about identity's course, increasingly ulterior from that which identity's course actually is. So increasingly valuable and proper substance and manifest, needed to be used by the syntax nature of people at each age of campus, each age of private, anywhere you are. In other words, we have to use phrases like criminal insidiousness, wrongdoers. We have to, an identity other than experts can afford discerned because of their roles with a method /S to those overt criminal enterprises and other bodies that speak through the news and things like that regarding their motivations. Like, for example, CNN has roles with, I forgot his name, a black man and people that said they were a part of the KKK leadership and are, therefore, at least to an extent. And they have them speaking about their motivations towards their relationships to each other. See, what they're being used to do is screen that which had nothing to do with black or white, though it was being assigned. Computer doesn't understand what a number is. Before binary numbers are valued, they have to be assigned that by a simultaneously there's the phenomenon of where and how they use the binary systems, countries with different letters, but we're using the same keyboard, the same amount of memory locations dedicated specifically to perceive and to temporarily store typings. Like what key we pressed, what letter we pressed, what sequence we pressed them in, what combinations of keys we press. They have books on it. They have videos on YouTube. I'll put some videos about how everyone should understand how a keyboard works of a computer. Because in other words, how the computers work like this, because it's very simple. But we don't want to have it told to us very simple, because already we have identity theft, fraud, slander rules formally. Now this method knew that was going to be that way formally, in collusion with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. There are proofs that we need to counter syntactically a hyper criminal enterprise that conceives syntactically countries as archetypal criminal enterprises, less than the hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, which is also more finite than the sophistications of modern countries as they're actually recorded. Sophistication doesn't have nuclear weapons. It means to go to outer space. And while simultaneously self-valuing the locations at the countries with the nuclear weapons, the suburbs, let alone urban, how since before cars, since before our founders were even born, that which was involved with the syntactical slavery of themselves, the identity theft, fraud, slander method against everyone, including them. Blaming other things, others, ourselves for what it caused to that, for example. It is manifest, where all kinds of opinions and convictions are manifest. With treatments of history that left out what is recorded first, the value of sequence truth, the value of human science, difference, so we can see the invisible human science being invisible but still discernible. Is it being followed or not? Because we have to add an additional care to it as its system, not just because we are its system no matter what, but as its system tactically. Again, which has no value. I mean, which cannot respect the sense and sensibilities and narratives of their motivations, natures, needs, interests, the theater locations, whether as performers, actors, overtly actors, actresses, or any kind of performers. With the news locations, they're still involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders. They're still involved with roles. We're hiding falsified police reports, racketeering, uses of the databases interbranch, self-value, criminally foreign influence, being and having been. They stack fake things into them. They have roles of child abuses. It is evidence where and how we have women leaders of the branches of government speaking through the men, the sick fakes since they were little kids. How they get away with it and got away with it has to do with how they've been using the road and route, the people involved next to with the houses. So if you make an arrow from where the witch trials place is and where George Washington had to leave slavery entrenched and counter extort the victim predators that were there, everyone, victim predator relative to positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, relative to where and how it is evidence, where and how there are answers that were right then and they're right now, but other was being and having been told. And they have motivations, natures, needs, interests, apparent, and apparently even when they are real, they're on demonstration of the same thing. So we have to understand how they have a whole bunch of different types of experts at same locations, like Hartford Hospital. It's all through the systems, because people have been using our badges and the whole identity of the FBI. They go up there to pretend they can feel good about themselves. When did any formal identity of the law have integrity by what is actually recorded regarding the value? What is actually the value of responses to where and how slavery was caused? Uses of black and what? In other words, they were assigned values. A location relative to the sequence of being typed, relative to the, the seconds and minutes going forward. There is complete memory of those being positive or negative. The letter A on the keyboard is being assigned an identity. It's an identity. I mean, it is an identity. Distinct from that, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneously value as that value progression coming through the circuit, coming through the computer as the electricity, as the value progression. So the clock, while the computer's on, we are manifest this way. In other words, we are sequence, live, simultaneous nature. And these are science's others. So please for WFSB, Fox Connecticut News, and WTNH, who are recorded communicating to me and others that they use crime methods like pretending it's personal when we say that they attach us to fake words. They fabricate audio and video, fake emails, and they have crimes with the prisons and their prisoners, with the courts putting them away. And the people who run those prisons, they were recorded, kept needing to hide live progressions, remote uses of themselves and their family members and friends, also as their roles with uses of corners of streets through time, where how fact-keeping nature-oriented predicate acts are inseparable from the manifest physical ones. Boxings, tons. So attend. So please follow mandated law. I asked the courts when they went there, they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles various ways to me and to others about this. And that they were going to pretend other and do it through time. They switched names, forged names, prevent writing while they are stacking and having stacked multiple fake narratives that don't even make sense with themselves. So they could adapt in the background because of the extent of since founding investigators and themselves off the interbranch locations, with the interbranch locations distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, and hyper-simultaneously. All that is having been used remotely. Their perception, perhaps perception is 3 identities of perception. 2 is 1/3/5 identities of perception, not 2. We have 2 eyes manifest because nature's nature is manifest. Also, with the increasing value of it. Also, with everything manifest how it actually is. It demonstrates where and how. Those are 3 volumes of itself, where value is nature / nature is value. And more forever nature itself more and more simultaneous nature, hyper simultaneous nature is generating itself as an identity of forever nature, which are 2 things that it is constantly, increasingly. And again, it has relativity to what is variable and constant, and or positive, negative, and means and needs by that all these other positive and negative treatments are tactile ulterior from. So they value the sciences obfuscated at each age and nature of the campuses, locations, sickly distinctly. This method knew that manifest would be distinct types of abuses of each age of fact-keeping nature, and locations with types of experts needing to respond to that, and simultaneously needing to hide the roles with names tied to themselves in those locations, where how the problems are actually manifest, worse than just problems. Here, I did you long, but here. So attend. These videos are to get a response. Get me in the who disbelieves. Get me them onto paper now. This is what the courts do since some ancient times. It proves. Everyone had to say who disbelieves because they forged names, switched names. They painted themselves into corners. They cannot defend themselves. They spoke themselves into corners behind people's backs still. All exception, nature, and demonstration, the same thing. They've been evidences because they've been victim predators the same way the overt criminal enterprises they sell value. Having been logic, hurt by others that they can use to hide, blame other things other than themselves, their own needs to keep really, people who spoke in uses of statistics, insights, and stuff like that. What is actually recorded scientists simultaneously being and having been, they have to hide from that. They have all these natures of employments on and off the record, kept so many ways, criminally foreign influence, needing to pretend other, simultaneously needing to keep valuing how criminally foreign influence sciences replace what our founders left us to teach and to know with other things, others ourselves. How they got away with that is a problem. Yeah. We'll speak for black or white. Recite. Tell me their name. Who disbelieves anything I said? These are CNN sources too. These are Fox News' sources too. These are MSNBC's sources too. Connecticut, Interbranch too. They're criminally foreign influence with the military too. Military. They have nurses out the colleges and young kids involve their family members. They have their family members of principals recorded, how their roles, even self-valuing roles with child abuse of mixed natures. They're locking little kids needing to hide life aggressions relative to where and how they never had one identity of integrity in nature. Anywhere! Pretend you could speak for anger or emotion or other people's or your own. We need someone who will speak for as a parent for this species. Sick. Follow mandated law for them. Someone who disbelieves anything I said. At least tell me that. Give me someone now. Here now!